This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Great to be with you tonight. Thank you for joining us. An investigator who worked for the province is accused of leaking information to the ringleader of a drug trafficking network. Detectives with the RCMP have charged 50-year-old Donovan Syrad with multiple offenses. This is all part of a months-long investigation, and as CBC's Josh Crabb reports, officers also allege drugs were trafficked on the grounds of Winnipeg's National Microbiology Lab.
Cocaine, crystal meth, and fentanyl are among an estimated $2.5 million of drugs intercepted by RCMP as part of Project Dawgpound. 19 guns were also seized in the investigation that started back in May 2022 and culminated in numerous arrests and charges, including against a provincial investigator.
We continue to target drug traffickers and suppliers as time and again we have seen communities and lives get destroyed by the illegal drug trade.
RCMP say 36-year-old Wei Ha was the orchestrator of the trafficking network, which brought in drugs and unstamped cigarettes from Ontario to Manitoba. Officers alleged the drugs were then distributed across the province and country. Detectives alleged Ha was leaked information on police enforcement plans by this man, 50-year-old Donovan Syrad. They identified him as an investigator with Manitoba Finance's Special Investigations Unit, a provincial team that works to crack down on contraband cigarettes.
The investigators were very astute in respect to determining and pinpointing exactly where that leak was coming from.
RCMP say detectives made sure there were no other leaks and then used the situation to their advantage. Syrad's been charged with bribery of officers, breach of trust by a public officer, and conspiracy to evade payment. The province declined comment on his status, but a justice source says Syrad's on a leave of absence without pay. At the RCMP Newser, Justice Minister Kelvin Gertson called the allegations concerning and said he has no doubt Manitoba Finance will conduct an internal investigation.
The clear message here is, regardless of who you are or where you work, if you are helping individuals in any way in the distribution or manufacture of drugs, there are consequences for that.
20 other people have been arrested and are facing charges as part of Project Dawgpound, including a Corps of Commissionaires guard who was working here at the Canadian Science Centre for Human and Animal Health.
That particular individual would meet with Wei Ha or other targets of the investigation on lab property and then would store and traffic drugs for this criminal organization while at work.
The complex is home to the National Microbiology Lab. A spokesperson from the Office of Federal Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos says they're aware charges have been laid against a former Corps of Commissionaires employee. The charges laid are concerning, the spokesperson said, and we are calling for an immediate internal investigation into the events that occurred on the grounds of the National Microbiology Laboratory. We have also directed our officials to review internal security procedures. In a statement to CBC, the Public Health Agency of Canada says the guards' access to the building was limited and they had no access to sensitive materials. The agency says it's already reviewing security operations. Josh Crabb, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The provincial government's opposition to supervised consumption sites is well documented. But today, the Progressive Conservatives seem to signal they may be changing their minds. As Ian Fraser reports, that doesn't mean Manitobans with drug addictions will have a place to legally consume drugs anytime soon.
If you want to open the first supervised consumption site in Manitoba, the province won't stand in the way. A new bill introduced Tuesday at the legislature would establish licensing requirements. But it doesn't mean the provincial government suddenly likes supervised consumption sites. Mental Health Minister Janice Morley-Lacombe says the province is creating standards just in case.
We can't stop them under the federal exemptions, but what we can do through the standardization of our policies ensure that anyone accessing is able to seek it in a safe environment. They're not isolated, they're able to report to the provincial health services, and there is medical and long-term support to support these individuals.
A few years ago, the federal government created exemptions to allow a provider to start a supervised consumption site in Manitoba, but none exists. In a newspaper column published today, Morley-Lacombe slammed the feds for not developing any safeguards. She also raised some hopes that maybe the province would endorse this harm reduction approach. She wrote in part that forthcoming measures could open a new window in the future for licensed and regulated supervised consumption sites to be established in Manitoba. The NDP felt the government's bill failed to deliver meaningful change.
This government should be ashamed of themselves, and they can create a safe consumption site today, and they should be listening to the experts and helping save Manitoban lives.
Meanwhile, the Liberals appreciate the bill at least develops rules for addiction service providers.
I don't know whether you or I would be any good at running a detox center, but anybody can do that if they want. You don't have to follow any regulations because there aren't any.
Morley Lacombe says personally she's concerned by the safety of these supervised consumption sites, but she wouldn't go so far as to say she opposes them. That's a change from previous Mental Health Minister Sarah Guimard, as well as Premier Heather Stevenson, both of whom have staunchly opposed these sites. Ian Fraze, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Imagine being told your loved one is in the hospital and isn't expected to survive. In the midst of crying and saying goodbye, you realize the person in the hospital bed isn't who you think it is. The CBC's Alana Cole has one family's story of mistaken identity.
Family members visited Health Sciences Centre last Friday, expecting to say goodbye to their loved one. Then they discovered the woman lying in the bed wasn't their loved one. That's according to Bianca Beauregard. She lives in Alberta now, but her family is in Winnipeg. She says last Friday she got a call saying her sister had overdosed, was in hospital at Health Sciences Centre, and wasn't going to make it through the night. But when members of her family, including the woman's 12-year-old daughter, went to say goodbye, Beauregard's younger sister noticed the patient lying in the bed didn't have the same tattoos her sister had. We spoke with Beauregard by Zoom.
She has like very distinctive tattoos, and like my sister, she was saying goodbye and my family was in there doing a prayer, and she went to go hold my sister's hand, and she had none of the same tattoos that my sister had.
Beauregard says her family was told the woman arrived at the hospital at around 5 a.m. and the person who called 911 identified the patient as her sister. A spokesperson for Shared Health says the majority of unconscious patients brought to the emergency department are identified either through ID or information gathered at the scene before arriving at the hospital. The spokesperson says in this case, an incorrect patient name was provided to hospital staff. Beauregard says she wants to see stricter protocols in place for situations like this to ensure this doesn't happen to another family.
I was relieved that it was not my sister, but I'm still upset and I'm still angry because it's like I was devastated. We were all devastated. Her daughter was in the room thinking that was her mom that was going to pass that night.
Shared Health says the patient in hospital was correctly identified with the help from an external agency, but couldn't provide any other information. Alana Cole, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A 17-year-old boy has been charged with manslaughter in the death of a 15-year-old in St. James last week. Police say the 15-year-old boy and his 17-year-old brother were in an altercation that day on Sackville Street with an unknown group of males. They made their way to a home on Amherst Street where they encountered the accused, a 17-year-old boy they knew. But he was armed with a gun, and police say that's when the 15-year-old was shot and critically injured. Police arrested the suspect Sunday. He's being held in custody. A man charged with killing a Winnipeg cab driver nearly 3 years ago has been found guilty of second-degree murder. Okoth Obiang got into Balvier Tour's cab on Burroughs near Andrew Street back in March of 2020. Court heard when the 44-year-old taxi driver asked to be paid up front. Obiang leaned over the back seat and stabbed him. The Crown prosecutor told court Obiang perceived being asked to pay up front as disrespect, and his anger erupted into murder. His lawyers argued he was not criminally responsible because he has bipolar disorder and had been experiencing episodes of mania. The judge rejected that argument. Sentencing will take place in April. Shamattawa First Nation has declared a state of emergency and says it desperately needs help. This comes after a devastating fire at a senior's home and recent suicides. Our Emily Brass filed a story on the situation yesterday on our online platforms and 11 p.m. newscast. But since this newscast was preempted by Juno's programming, you may have missed it. Given the importance of the story, we didn't want to risk that. We warn you, details may be upsetting.
Dozens of elders lost their homes as a fire ripped through a seniors complex. The community had no choice but to stand and watch. Shamattawa First Nation's only fire truck is out for repairs in Winnipeg. Chief Jordan Hill says the community is overwhelmed and he declared a state of emergency.
I'm tired, I'm hurt, and I'm pissed off.
The First Nation has asked Ottawa for help for the displaced seniors fast. The winter road into Shamattawa will only stay open another week or so, likely too late to ship trailers or the broken fire truck. Even more troubling right now for Chief Hill is the mental health crisis facing young people.
They have no future. They got no place to look up to.
Hill says 70% of people in Shamattawa are under 30. He says they don't get the same activities and support as youth in other parts of the province, and that can lead to despair. A teenage girl recently commits suicide after asking for help and not getting it. Last Wednesday, the girl's mother also took her own life. Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Grand Chief Kathy Merrick says the tragedy can be traced back to government neglect.
We are beggars in our own country, and it breaks my heart sitting here today to hear the story of a mother cutting down her daughter, her baby girl.
The First Nation is also dealing with violence and addictions and conflicts between locals and police. Court hearings have been moved to Thompson since the band office hasn't had heat or water for 2 years. MKO Grand Chief Garrison Settee hopes the state of emergency makes Shamattawa's problems impossible to avoid.
Because it's not just the suicide, it's not only infrastructure, it's not only housing, but it's a whole gamut of things that have been abandoned and neglected for so long.
Settee says governments have treaty obligations to help. Emily Brass, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Indigenous Services Canada tells CBC it is in contact with Shamattawa leadership about supports. We know stories like these can be very upsetting to many of us. If you need help, Talk Suicide Canada is always there. You can call or text the numbers on your screen. You'll also find those numbers on the website talksuicide.ca. 2 children are safe tonight after someone stole the vehicle they were in last evening. Police say around 10 p.m. a woman stole a vehicle from a hotel parking lot on Ellis Avenue in Winnipeg. The 2 kids in the back seat pleaded with the woman to stop. At first, she refused, but 10 minutes later, she let them out of the car. After that, police say she zigzagged through the city at a high rate of speed. Just after 11 p.m., the vehicle hit a car at Grant Avenue and Stafford, and the driver ran off. A short time later, a 29-year-old woman was arrested. She faces multiple charges, including kidnapping and forcible confinement. A school in the Seven Oaks School Division is offering a Punjabi bilingual program next year. It's the first of its kind in Manitoba. Joanne Roberts has details.
The first letter is Uda. It sounds as U.
Jaspreet Hari's family speaks Punjabi at home. Even though her son is a fluent speaker, she's enrolling him in the new bilingual program at Amber Trails Community School.
He loves English as well as Punjabi, and he's proud that he can speak more languages. So I think that's exciting for him.
Hari says the program will help connect people in the community, especially children with older generations.
Their grandparents don't know English and kids don't know Punjabi, so there's a gap in like both generations. So that gap will be filled if they know a little bit of Punjabi.
Hari says the bilingual program is much needed as the South Asian community continues to grow. In Winnipeg, the population went from 37,000 to 62,000 in 5 years, with over 30,000 people declaring Punjabi as their mother tongue.
To keep the culture alive, language needs to be flowing between generations.
Navjeet Kambo is the principal of the school. She says parents have been contacting her non-stop to enroll their children.
Punjabi bilingual program is about sharing, experiencing and celebrating Punjabi language with one another, regardless of the heritage.
Kambo says she's happy her school can serve the growing South Asian community with the program.
They need to know like where their parents came from, what kind of language they speak, so they can carry all that together in the future.
Bhupinder Basar is enrolling his son in the program. He says he wants his children to be fluent so they can communicate with their grandparents and learn from them.
They have more experience and they can teach the kids about the values and all the things, that good things that they experience in their life.
Basar hopes other families without ties to Punjabi culture consider the program. He says it's important for people to learn about different cultures.
The more people know about other cultures, and better to communicate.
The program runs from kindergarten to grade 2, with hopes to extend it through older ages as it evolves.
मैं सितंबर च स्कूल जाऊंगी.
Joanne Roberts, CBC News, Winnipeg.
It is now official. The 2025 Grey Cup game will be played here in Winnipeg. The league made the announcement this morning. Dana Spiring will co-chair the Grey Cup festivities. She's a former board chair of the Blue Bombers and the head of Economic Development at Winnipeg. Spiring says the planning has already begun. Hotel rooms and venues have been reserved.
I can tell you that there will be lots of opportunities for football fans from around Manitoba to volunteer and be part of the events that we plan to host all over our province. We want this Grey Cup to be one that brings Manitobans together.
Winnipeg last hosted the CFL Championship game back in 2015. Now we just need them to also play in that game in 2025. Oh, it'd be great. Today has been so windy, John.
Yeah, we expected that. I'm looking behind you and I see the light standard moving around. Now, in the city, you really haven't noticed much in the way of visibility issues, but outside the city, it is a completely different story. Have a look at this video, and this is in southwestern Manitoba this morning. Aaron posted this on Twitter and on YouTube as well, but you can see the very poor visibility there in southwestern Manitoba. This is somewhere right around Boissevain, but it was that kind of day, and I've seen wind gusts, on-hour wind gusts at the airport up around 82 kilometers per hour. Let me show you the current conditions because it is still very windy as we head on into the evening hours here. We've got winds sustained at 54 kilometers per hour, gusting to 67. So that's an on-hour snapshot at the airport. Now, between those snapshots that come in on the hour when the data is posted, you can get winds up and down from there. So still very strong winds. I've heard of jackknife semis on the north perimeter, all kinds of traffic problems and very poor visibility out of the city. Now, -3, you would think that with that little bit of warming, maybe some of the snow is sticking together a little bit. Let's hope that happens. But we are dropping tonight to about -9 degrees, and we'll continue to be cloudy. I've got to step over here and just put the system in the right mode to show you the rest of the graphics. So it'll take another 5 or 6 seconds. But here we are. Weather alert that I did want to show you has now been actually shifted. It was in southwestern Manitoba, so we were looking at conditions back in the west here in this blowing snow advisory, and now this has been shifted to just head right over to Winnipeg. This section has ended now, so worst visibility right through Pilot Mound, Manitou, Morden, Winkler, even Emerson and St. Agathe, for instance, over on Highway 59. All of those areas in that blowing snow advisory. To the north, and all part of the same system, today and tonight, upwards of 20 centimeters. I think we're going to end up with a little bit more than that because snowfall amounts, additional snowfall in Thompson could be well over 15 centimeters just tonight and then through the day tomorrow. The cold front is just to the west of us, and that's depicted by the drier air, that clearing that is just on the back edge of the cloud. And out of this line of cloud moving through, we may see a few flurries through the evening hours, Right now, just cloudy and windy in Winnipeg, but yeah, a few flurries possible before that system moves on away. So there's the low across the north and still some more additional snow across northern Manitoba. Then as we get into later Wednesday, that system really starts to settle down in the north and move off to the east. And we'll see increasing cloud here. And then just through the next couple of days, just wind out of the north and a couple of days where temperatures will kind of struggle as well. So in the next 24 hours, right up to this time tomorrow, we could see another 20+ centimeters in Thompson, 17 in God's Lake, and 13 in Shamattawa. So still lots of snow to come, even into the Lynn Lake area. Winds are heaviest right about now through the Red River Valley, the southern Red River Valley, Interlake region, and then they do really settle down through the day tomorrow. By the time we get into Thursday afternoon, those winds will be out of the northwest and starting to pick up again with gusts of 40 or 50 kilometers per hour. A few flurries, no accumulating snow, winds still strong in the evening, then clearing overnight. Bit of a brighter start to tomorrow than it will be at the end of the day, but -3 northwest winds 15 to 20. So that -3 is going to feel a whole lot better. Then some cool days and windy days as we head toward the weekend, and still cool but sunny, Janet. On Saturday, I think the better day to be outside on the weekend will be Sunday, and I'll show you why in a little bit.
Looking forward to that. Thanks, John.
You bet.
A hometown hero is back in Winnipeg. Tomorrow night, Chris Jericho and the all-elite wrestling crew will put on a show in town. CBC's Marjorie Dowhouse spoke with Chris Jericho today.
All right, big show tomorrow night here at Canada Life Centre, and I've got a very special guest standing by with me to talk about the big show, Chris Jericho. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be back here at the Canada Life Centre, one of my favorite arenas in the entire world, and getting ready for our AEW debut in Winnipeg, which is very exciting.
This is the second Canadian city that the AEW has visited. Toronto was the first Canadian stop for the AEW. How does it feel to be back here at home as part of the AEW and performing in front of a hometown crowd?
So it's interesting because AEW, the genesis of the company, basically formed when Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega, also from Winnipeg, from Transcona, headlined the Tokyo Dome in 2018 in a match that was brokered by Don Callis, another Winnipegger. So that's kind of the first match where our boss Tony Khan saw the business that it did, because it did huge numbers on a worldwide basis on streaming and pay-per-view and that sort of thing, and decided that maybe the world was waiting and ready for an alternative. I can't think of another city that we should be making, our second Canadian show in other than Winnipeg, because it basically started here in a lot of ways.
So what is the next thing? People know you, of course, as a wrestler, an actor, author, podcaster, musician, business person. What's the next thing for you? Is there a next thing? Is there something surprising that maybe you're thinking of or that you want to try?
There's always a next thing, but it usually just comes at you. You know what I mean? Like when Fozzy played the Kiss Cruise, for example, in 2015, I was just on the cruise going, I could totally do this. I could do a wrestling cruise. Before that, I never thought, hey, I want to do a wrestling cruise. I don't have a list of things I want to do. Like I was just on The Masked Singer a couple months ago. I never once ever wanted to do The Masked Singer until they asked me, and I thought, that could be kind of fun. Let me give it a try. So I'm sure there could be something going on right now. I could get an email or a text or a call while I'm talking to you of something that I never thought of before. But if it sounds interesting to me, then I'll do it. I don't really care about money. I don't do things for money. I do things because I want to do it, because I feel like it'd be fun to do and it'd be something creative to do.
Very strange, especially in the treehouse.
I always think of that, like would my fans appreciate this? Would they think it's cool? Would they like it? Is it something that I think would put a smile on their faces? So there's a lot of that involved as well.
This has to be emotional for you. We've seen in your entrances the crowd singing along to Judas when you come in. I'm sure that's got to be pretty emotional. And then you're here being celebrated by your hometown. You're going to have a street named after yourself and the street that you actually
The street that I grew up on,
how does that feel?
It's amazing. Like I actually threw it out there like just for fun, like, oh, see if you can get a street named after me. And we started looking into it, and suddenly there was a little bit of interest, and then it kind of went away, and then it came back. And we were thinking of just some like back alley or something where we used to hang out and smoke cigarettes like in the 80s, but they actually asked me, where did you grow up? And I said, in Westwood on Wordsworth Way. And that's the street they're gonna make it honorary Chris Jericho Way, whatever they do it. So that's really cool. That's something that, like, I mean, you do a lot of stuff, and I always, you know, sit back and drink it in, man, if you will. But, you know, being in a video game is cool, or having an action figure, all that stuff is cool. But to have a street named after you, especially the one that you grew up on, you know, my mom, you know, passed away years ago at the house where we lived at when I was a kid. So it's pretty cool. Like, that's one of those things that definitely doesn't happen every day. And it doesn't happen to everybody either. Always talk about Winnipeg. It's always a blast to come back just to be here, but to actually have a show here and be in front of all these fans, it's going to be a special night that we remember for a long time.
Thank you so much.
It's a story that just has so many people upset around the country. 2 people dead, 9 others, including a baby, injured after a deadly hit and run in Quebec. Police say a man drove his pickup into a group of pedestrians. We'll find out more after the break. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. Tragedy ripples through a small town in eastern Quebec. A local man faces 2 counts of dangerous driving causing death, and more charges are expected after 11 people were run down by a pickup truck. CBC's Sarah Levitt has the latest.
It was quite the scene outside of the MQI courthouse this afternoon when Steve Gagnon arrived for his hearing. Lots of people from the town arrived hour before the hearing itself and waited for him to get out of the police car and get into the courthouse, and they had some choice words for him. This all stemming from what happened yesterday at 3 p.m. when witnesses say that Gagnon drove a pickup along the main stretch of road, jumped the curb and hit several pedestrians. This witness says he jumped out of the way of the pickup and then tried to help 2 men on the ground. He describes a chaotic scene and says he heard a child crying, trapped in a stroller, a woman underneath it. 2 people are dead, 7 others were brought to the hospital, 6 to a Quebec City trauma center. 3 of them are dealing with life-threatening injuries. 3 others, that include a baby and a toddler, are in stable condition, and it's left the people in this small town shaken.
We need to take care of the family of people who are dead now, people who are injuries right now. In Mi'kmaq, the word MQI means where people are happy. Since yesterday is where people are crying.
All day long, people have been going to the local church to leave flowers and stuffed animals, a way for them to try to heal from this and try to move forward. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, MQI, Quebec.
A religious order of the Catholic Church has released the names of more than 24 priests who have been accused of sexually abusing children over the last 60 years. The Jesuits of Canada say only 3 of those listed are still alive. A warning, details of this story are distressing. Marina von Stackelberg reports.
The Jesuits of Canada has named 27 priests and brothers it says are credibly accused of sexually abusing children. CBC News has not independently verified the allegations. On the list is George Epoch, believed to have sexually abused more than 100 children, including Bob Lemieux.
What Epoch did to me has ruined much of my life.
Epoch died in the 1980s. Only 3 of the priests named as abusers on the list are still alive. The audit looked at cases dating back 60 years.
How many other Jesuits are in the category of allegations that somebody decided weren't credible?
In a letter addressed to parishioners, Canadian Jesuit leader Eric Oland says the Catholic Church has been slow to respond to abuse cases. He writes, moving through phases of outright denial, victim blaming, and moral incompetence, the Church has begun to respond justly.
Mothers sent these children to the priest for protection, not knowing the priest was abusing them. It was a heartbreak.
Some of those priests worked in residential schools and at churches on First Nations.
Having this information out there and publicly available helps to build up that truth around the residential school system and its legacies. And what it does now is it sets a precedent for other religious orders.
Survivors say the Church needs to do more.
These crimes happened in a systemic way. They allowed men to be present at the most vulnerable times in people's lives, and children were harmed.
The Jesuits have paid more than $7.5 million in settlements to victims of abuse. They acknowledge some priests were never charged or convicted. They say the list can always be added to if new allegations surface. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
The post-pandemic lockdown's return to traveling has been marred by frequent flight disruptions and unhappy passengers. Some critics say not enough is being done to keep airlines in check. As Sophia Harris reports, today Ottawa announced a plan to try to smooth out the bumpy skies.
Mohammed Jazayiri and his wife enjoyed most of their vacation in Mexico.
This is on a sunset on the beach.
Until Sunwing canceled their flight back to Vancouver. After waiting nearly a week for another flight, Jazayiri gave up and bought tickets home on a different airline.
It was a nightmare. The support that we got from Sunwing was nothing.
Sunwing, which will soon be taken over by WestJet, hasn't reimbursed Jazzy for the return flight. So he filed a complaint with the Canadian Transportation Agency. But due to mass flight disruptions both in the summer and in December, the CTA has a backlog of more than 40,000 complaints. Jazzy was told it could take more than 18 months to review his case.
Justice delayed is justice denied. This whole system's on life support right now. It's not functioning the way it was supposed to.
The backlog is huge.
The federal government is now promising nearly $76 million over 3 years to address the problem.
This will, in real term, mean 200 additional employees who will focus exclusively on complaints. That will take a massive dent out of the backlog.
Ottawa gave the CTA $11 million last year for the same reason. But the backlog only grew. The opposition says Prime Minister Justin Trudeau needs to do more.
He should allow for the complaints that are made against the airlines and the airports to be heard more quickly, and the penalties to be meted out to against those airlines quicker.
The CTA recently doled out fines to several major airlines, the highest to Sunwing for $126,000 for failing to update passengers about flight delays in December. Some experts say the fines need to soar higher.
We have yet to see the regulator really bring out a big stick on anything, I would say, and that's very disappointing.
To help keep airlines in check, Ottawa says it will introduce tougher air passenger protection regulations in the spring. Sophia Harris, CBC News, Vancouver.
2 U.S. bank failures in less than a week have rattled financial markets and triggered widespread concerns about the stability of the American banking system. The collapse of one bank in particular sent shockwaves into Canada, shaking this country's tech sector. CBC's Nisha Patel explains.
The collapse of Silicon Valley Bank sent Chris Hardvickson scrambling.
At that moment, you're looking at the world going, we could lose everything right now. Everything.
His Vancouver startup Dooley had millions of dollars in a U.S. account with SVB that he managed to transfer to a big Canadian bank.
I feel relief for my business. I feel relief for my investors. I feel relief for my customers.
SVB was a banker to tech companies. While its Canadian arm didn't take deposits, it offered lines of credit for startups. Its failure is hitting especially hard for companies in Waterloo that weren't able to move their money.
Everyone's pretty exhausted trying to deal with something that no one anticipated.
With U.S. regulators stepping in, those tech firms should be able to access their funds. But insiders fear SVB's failure will discourage other lenders and make it hard to get financing.
That's effectively stopped investment. And so we're very concerned that the whole ecosystem, is at some meaningful risk.
Canadian regulators have taken over SVB's offices here, and while rattled investors are selling off financial stocks, analysts say the broader banking sector is stable, and fallout north of the border will be muted.
Canadian banks in Canada are systematically important banks, which means they're well protected, they're too big to fail, and they've taken the steps and protections.
A sentiment echoed by the federal government.
The message is that our banks are very resilient and Canadians should feel confident.
But for those who just watched their bank shut down overnight, confidence is in short supply.
What do you think of the speed of how this all happened?
Scary. I think it's really scary.
Still, there's hope that this bank run has ended as quickly as it started. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
Up next, we'll bring you highlights from Canada's biggest night in music, the Junos broadcast in Edmonton. Plus, John Sauder brings us his Manitoba forecast. You're watching CBC.
This is how you remind me. This is how you remind me of
A topless protester crashed the stage at the Juno Awards last night. Singer-songwriter Avril Lavigne kept calmly talking, introducing the next performer, before laughing and asking the protester to get the blank off the stage. It took security 20 seconds to kind of wander over to the protester and get her to leave. Julia Wong reports on how the rest of the evening went.
It was an electrifying night in Edmonton as the best in Canadian music were celebrated and took the stage for the annual Juno Awards. Alberta-born Nickelback put on a show-stopping performance. Now, this band is celebrating 27 years together, and they were inducted into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame. For whatever reason, Nickelback is either loved or hated, and they had this message for their critic.
We're four guys that make music, and we have been absolutely ripped through the mud, and worse, for a good 15 years of our 27-year career. So what's it like? It sucks. What's it like to win this award tonight? Redemption.
Yeah. Host Simu Liu kept the 2-hour show moving, whether it was by singing or dancing or even backflipping his way through the ceremony. Winners included Jesse Reyes for Contemporary R&B Recording of the Year, Toby for Rap Album of the Year, The Weeknd picked up a Juno for Album of the Year, and Avril Lavigne beat out The Weeknd and took home the award for Fan Choice. Preston Pablo was named the Breakthrough Artist of the Year.
First of all, I'd just like to thank my family for being my biggest supporters from the jump. My brother Dawson, man, for just really pushing me to keep doing this and to get here.
The Junos also marked a milestone in music history, celebrating 50 years of hip-hop, with a performance from groundbreaking artists like Michie Mee and Maestro Fresh West. Now, this awards show brought together fans from coast to coast to coast, and the Junos will be heading to Halifax next year. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
John Sauder joins us now with news of why everybody is dancing. It seems like we need to just stay warm. Temperatures are really up and down.
Really up and down over the next week. We got an upper pattern that brings in a trough, and then we start to warm up again, which is good news. I'll show you the upper level pattern here over the next 4 or 5 days or so. Now we're on the warm side of the jet stream right now, so that's why temperatures today and likely tomorrow will be up around -3. Seasonal would be right around that -1 mark or even 0 by the weekend. But then we get into Thursday and we've got a gusty northerly wind. We've got a nice big ridge in the west. This is where the warm air will be. And then this kind of sticks around for a few days. We go through Friday and Saturday, and we're still at midday Saturday, still on that colder side of the jet stream. And then as we get into Sunday and I think Monday, Tuesday, we start to warm up once again. So the pattern shift is certainly there. We're at -4 right now at the airport downtown at -2. And temperatures today didn't really struggle. That south wind that was so strong and still is really bringing in some milder air. +2 in Sprague, Kenora, Red Lake, all at 2 degrees. Pinawa +1, 2 degrees in Dauphin, a -1 in Brandon. We're still seeing some highway issues in the southern Red River Valley. -6 is around Flin Flon and the Pas. This is all snow across the north, and you can see that temperatures on the south side of that snow line are quite a bit warmer, but -14 and another likely 20 centimeters out of that cloud in the north coming to areas like Thompson and out to the east for later tomorrow. Tonight, though, a chance of flurries mixed with freezing drizzle through northwestern Ontario and the southeast corner of Manitoba, right around Sprague. Otherwise, we'll see a few evening flurries. Windy conditions continuing. That's what that icon indicates. And then clearing skies overnight, and we'll see increasing cloud through the day tomorrow. So overnight lows are pretty close to the seasonal conditions. Still some gusty wind through the evening up around Dauphin, Swan River with westerly winds gusting to 70. Behind that front, that wind direction is changing. Another 5 to 10 in Flin Flon, 10 centimeters at least in Thompson tonight. Same with Gillam. And then just periods of snow tomorrow. Morning snow in Norway House, just cloudy out to the west, an additional 2 to 4 centimeters in areas to the east. And Churchill, minus 18 in the sunshine. You'll be north of that snowfall. Generally cloudy conditions and temperatures just below zero by a few degrees across most regions. Pinawa getting to 0 with a sun cloud mix tomorrow. And then northwestern Ontario, in the morning you may see a flurry or some freezing drizzle. Otherwise cloudy and seasonal.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
It was a special night at the Junos for one Manitoba teacher. We're going to hear from Jewel Castleman after the break about her big win. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. A respected Winnipeg music teacher was among the winners at the Juno Awards last night.
And our winner is Jewel Castleman. Congratulations to you.
Jewel Castleman from Lakewood School won the 2023 Music Counts Teacher of the Year Award. That award recognizes a music teacher who's had an impact on students and music education. Castleman has been teaching music for 34 years and plans to retire at the end of June. We caught up with her at the airport in Edmonton as she's about to fly home. Congratulations.
Well, thank you very much.
What's it like to hear your name called at the Junos?
When I heard it again just now, my heart just starts to race. It was so surreal. It was unbelievable to hear your name announced at a huge award ceremony like that. It was very unreal.
How did you celebrate the win?
Well, we went out afterwards. We went to a red carpet area and celebrated with a lot of other nominees and winners, and people were coming up to me and congratulating me and telling me how important music teachers are and that we're the reason they are who they've become as musicians. And then I went out with my family for some dinner and then went off to a jam session with Jim Cuddy.
Wow, that's quite fun.
It was lots of fun.
You're wrapping up a career in music education, and now here you are surrounded by all these music industry professionals coming to you and telling you how important music teachers are. How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel so appreciated, and other music educators across the country appreciate it as well. But just to have somebody come up to you and say, you're the reason that we are who we are, it's really unbelievable. And these are coming from professional musicians who make a living doing music and making music and entertaining people. So to have them come up and say music teachers are important, I had 3 or 4 people tell me they felt that was the most important award of the whole entire evening.
Wow.
Like, it's amazing.
Jewel Castleman, thank you so much for making time for us. And once again, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Your 7-day forecast and daily lift still to come. Stay with us.
Well, -3 tomorrow is going to feel a whole lot better. The winds won't be as strong, but the winds do pick up this time out of the north on Thursday and Friday. Still cool the next few days as we head on into the weekend. Saturday, -8, but then we warm up to -2 on Sunday. A bacon-themed potluck was so popular, bacon lovers in New Brunswick have made it a tradition.
And what a fun way to raise money for the food bank. Here's your daily lift.
I won in 2009. I made bacon-wrapped teriyaki dates, and they were a hit. And it's actually how my husband and I ended up becoming married.
I'm the 2016 champion. I'm very proud of that. So I didn't even enter a dish this year because I've already proved myself. It is the 6th biennial, even though we don't do it every 2 years, Bacon, a bacon convention. We're a fun group of friends who like food and giggles, and we decided in 2009 that we should have a bacon conference and call it the Bacon. Bacon is better. We've done it 6 times now over 14 years, 2009, 2011, 2014, 16, 2020, and now 2023. It's basically a big potluck. People bring bacon-inspired dishes, and they've gotten more and more outrageous over the years because you've really got to bring your A game to win now.
Not only do we want to experience the wonder of bacon, we totally feel that we can win.
Usually our judges don't last more than 1 term because you have to taste everything and then you have to spend the next 3 years recovering from eating all of that bacon.
I always find the sweets are weird. But I think the most intense thing I ever sampled was shake and bake bacon. It was so salty, like you could put it in your mouth and you could feel all of the moisture leave your body.
It's artery clogging delicious. We do a donation to the food bank Alimentaire Depot. In the past, we would do like a can drive, but in recent years, we've been doing it as a cash donation. The food depot can stretch cash donations so much further.
We're doing a 50-50, and so the 50-50 winnings will go to the Moncton Food Bank.
It's a brilliant idea for a fundraiser.
Yeah, it's a great fundraiser, but you know, just watching that story, I sort of feel my arteries clogging up already.
I just want to try that one that takes all the moisture out of your body.
The shake and bake bacon, yeah.
Yeah, and what were those little things? They looked like pigs that were in like pretzel fence or something like that?
Like little piggies.
Vegetarians watching
Pigs
this
in a
are
blanket.
perhaps very upset about this, but I think it sounds delicious. Steal the idea, Winnipeg. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.